limits for THC concentrations for drivers in Canada. What are those? And sort of, based on your research or your knowledge in the area, do you have an opinion? Is that too low, too high, or?
So the legal limits vary by jurisdiction. Some don't have limits. Others have limits of blood THC. So THC being a psychoactive component of cannabis that's thought to impair driving. Of five nanograms per mil seems to be the limit that most people sort of talk about. And in Canada, we have two different limits. One is 2 nanograms per mil, which is sort of the lower level of offense, and then 5 nanograms per mil, which is a higher level of offense. And so the jurisdictions vary. Some have a zero tolerance, which has a 0 nanogram per mil threshold, and others have 2, others have 5. So in the paper that you had mentioned, what we looked at was whether or not there's a relationship of THC in the blood to impaired driving. Of course, one way to deter driving after the use of cannabis is to look at blood THC and see how that and see what the levels are. So if a police officer suspects somebody of being impaired after cannabis, they can pull them over. They can do a number of roadside tests, then they can take them back to a lab to have blood drawn. And what we found, which is coming out of the literature more and more, although it's not 100% one way or the other, is that as blood THC goes up, we don't necessarily see an exact relationship to changes in driving. So we look at weaving, which is the amount of departure from a lane, which is a measure that's very consistently affected by cannabis and other drugs. So just how much you deviate when you're moving in your lane. So we call it weaving. The scientific term is standard deviation of lateral position. So we looked at that and tried to see how that relates to blood THC. And we didn't see that there was a clear relationship. So as blood THC levels went up, we didn't necessarily see an exact correspondence of changes in driving. Some people were impaired at higher levels of blood THC, others weren't. There wasn't an exact relationship. But if we sort of broke it down by the 5 nanogram per mil threshold and looked at those who were above versus those who were below, we found that those two groups were different. So there seems to be some merit in those limits, that we do seem to be detecting some measure of impairment. Although I have to put the caveat in there that that was just for smoked cannabis. We may see differences with edibles or other routes of administration.